We'll do markets a bit differently this time. On the off chance you didn't already know, this week marks the 50th anniversary of man's first footsteps on the moon. July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed the lunar module, and Armstrong stepped out to be the first human on the lunar surface. 50 years is a long time. We thought it might be interesting to share with you a few of the differences in agriculture between then and now. First, a little background. The U.S. population was a third less in 1969 than it is now, and there are more than twice the number of people on the planet. Life expectancy is longer now, hopefully because of all that good farmer food. GDP is quite a bit more, 21 trillion versus 1 trillion. Gas was a lot cheaper, 35 cents a gallon versus 2.83 on average. Milk was $1.10 a gallon in '69, $3.27 now, though figuring in inflation actually would make it $7.53 a gallon. Price is too low. That's why many dairy farmers have gone out of business these days. Eggs were 62 cents a dozen and bread was 23 cents a loaf. There were more farms when we landed on the moon, 2.7 million then versus 2 million now. The high point was 6.8 million farms in 1935. By the way, number of acres devoted to farms back then, 1 billion, a little less now thanks to better yields. The value of farmland 50 years ago was $206 billion. It's more than 10 times that now. Per acre then, the value was under $200 in 1969. It's about $3 grand in 2019. Back when we landed on the moon, you could buy a dairy cow for under $300. Now it's roughly $1,300. Farmers made up about 8% of the American population in '69. That number is under 1% now. Yields and technology have changed all that. The president was Richard Nixon in 1969. He was very proud of the space program. Donald Trump was 23 when Armstrong declared that giant leap. Trump may take us back to the moon sometime in the next few years. And finally, Clifford Hardin was the Ag Secretary back in '69. He got all his degrees from Purdue University. Ironically, Sonny Perdue is the secretary now. He was just 22 when we landed on the moon. A couple of years later, he got his doctor of veterinary medicine from the University of Georgia, then went into the Air Force. He got into politics in 1991. Since we're on this subject, let's do a moonshot trivia question. I already told you the first 2 men on the moon who they were, but the third man in that crew stayed in the command module and orbited the moon while Neil and Buzz walked around Tranquility Base. Today's question, who was the third member of the Apollo crew? Was it A, Alan Shepard, B, Michael Collins, C, Deke Slayton, or D, Jim Lovell? We'll have the answer coming up. No question, it's been a wildly unpredictable year in the world of agriculture. Corn has taken a huge hit this growing season, or has it? We asked analyst Tom Fitzenmeyer what he thinks is likely to happen.
I don't know what to expect because we have no idea really what the acreage is. They're going to do this resurvey of 14 states, and that number isn't going to come out till August. Yield, we have no idea. I mean, a bunch of the corn, 40% of the corn was planted after June 1st, so there's got to be some yield implications to that. They did already lower the yield 10 bushel per acre approximately, so to some extent that's been taken into account, but we don't know if that's enough yet. We're looking at a couple weeks here, maybe hot and dry weather, which the first 2 or 3 days, that's probably good for the crop. After that, it could be a problem. So, there's just so much unknown on the supply side. You know, if you take the bullish scenario where acreage is a lot lower, yield drops, then we're well underpriced probably on December corn. If on the other hand, you know, it's kind of, there was some loss, but not too bad, and we have a decent fall and an okay summer, maybe 450 to 475 is good enough for December corn. The tricky part about corn, in my mind, is that assume we get down to a 1.1 to 1.2 billion bushel carryout. The USDA was at 2 billion, so we lose 800 to 900 million bushel of corn. That's a big drop, but it's also not running out. And South America is going to have corn that competes with us right into the fall, probably, because the Brazilian crop is about being harvested, so they're going to compete with us. And then you get into what are they going to produce next winter. And then add to that, the way the price differentials are, we could see huge corn acreage in the U.S. next summer.
So that's what could happen next year. But this year in Mississippi, where producers in the heavily flooded Delta are likely to get the highest rates of trade aid, I asked analyst Josh Maples what he thinks the big picture is. Josh, the latest Acreage Report creates about as many questions as it answers. With all the weather that's been going on in the country, and certainly right here in Mississippi, what's the acreage looking like in 2019 for corn and soybeans?
You're exactly right, Mike. I mean, this report gives us estimates about what acreage is going to be, but it was collected back in early June. So we look at the numbers, but at the same time, we know that a lot's happened since then. So looking here in Mississippi specifically, looking at corn acreage, about 590,000 acres. This would be up significantly, about 100,000 acres over 2018 numbers. But if we look back to what we thought we were going to plant back in March, we're really not that far off of that number. So that makes us think a little bit that maybe, this acreage report could be a little overestimated, and so we'll have to watch that on corn. Soybeans, just below 2 million acres. This will be down about 300,000 acres from last year. But again, both of those have been impacted by recent weather, so you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, knowing that things could have changed.
So producers trying to play a little catch up if they can, not the easiest thing to do.
Right, absolutely.
What about cotton and rice?
So for cotton, we're looking at about 700,000 acres. This will be up about 80,000 acres over 2018 numbers. So quite a bit more cotton this year than last year. And for rice, 150,000 acres. This would be up about 10,000 acres from a year ago. Both of these numbers, again, weather impacts are real there too. There was certainly some replant that had to happen for both of those. But that's where we're sitting right now with the latest estimate.
Big picture, what does the report mean for Mississippi crop producers?
So I think it means a couple of things. Really less for cotton and rice and more for corn and soybeans. For corn, the message is pretty clear, even though it's uncertain. So it's pretty clear in that it drove prices down right after the report because the overall corn number was a lot bigger than people expected. For soybeans, the message is that we're probably going to see some opportunities to get rid of some of the beans that we had in storage from last year. I know we focus a lot on current crop, but we've also still got a lot of beans in storage from last year, and probably going to provide some opportunities with this weather uncertainty to clear out a lot of that bin space.
Back to the trivia quiz now as we wrap things up. Today's question was, who was the third member of the Apollo 11 crew 50 years ago? Was it A, Alan Shepard, B, Michael Collins, C, Deke Slayton, or D, Jim Lovell? Well, I'll give you a hint. He's still around. He's 88 now. He was born actually in Rome, Italy, and did some of his training right here in Columbus. Give up? The answer is B, Michael Collins. He said he wanted to help achieve John F. Kennedy's 1962 goal of landing on the moon within the decade. He never went back into space again.